When I watch Mr. Newman work the crowd, I have to wonder what he's made of. Flesh and bone like the rest of us folk, sure. But what makes him tick? How does he greet people warmly and openly, but still maintain that sympathetic face?
Isaac,
Miss Newman says as she walks up to me.
We've had an incident in viewing room 3.
What sort of incident, ma'am? I ask as I turn away from Mr. Newman as he says goodbye to the family members and well-wishers after the latest service. He stands there on the front steps and gives each person his undivided attention.
Apparently, a not-so-potty-trained toddler decided he was a cat and made a doo-doo in the potted ficus by the picture window,
Miss Newman replies. Teresa and Terrence Newman, brother and sister, owners of the Newman Funeral Home. I blink a few times and Miss Newman sighs.
I know, Isaac,
she says, reading my mind.
We are looking into getting child supervision. We just haven't found the right person.
What she means is, she hasn't found the right person that will work for close to nothing. The Newmans are good people, and I've enjoyed working for them these past few years as the home's general custodian and maintenance worker. But they are cheap. No easy way to say it. If they had a choice between saving a life, but it would cost them $100, or maybe saving a life and it would only cost them $50, they'd take the gamble and go with the 50. Probably a bad analogy, considering they'd rather not save a life and hopefully get the business for the funeral. I'm only half joking. They aren't ghouls, not like the Tomlinsons down the street. Those bastards would watch a child walk into traffic if they knew the parents would come to them for all the services. I ain't kidding. Marcia Tomlinson has got something wrong in her. Deep wrong.
Did the kid at least bury it after? Don't be crude,
she says, and pats my arm before walking away. I take a deep breath, give my practiced, sad smile to the grieving folks as they walk by, then take my rake and head around back so I can stow it in the shed and grab the small gardening shovel and a trash bag. By the time I'm inside the home, all but a couple of the mourners have left. It's a cremation, so there's no burial today. Just a real pretty urn set on a pedestal in viewing room 4. I take a glance at the people as they pray by the urn, and then keep walking across the hall to viewing room 3 and the ficus. No, the kid didn't bury it. Looks like the kid crawled up in that pot, dropped their trousers, and did their business right on top. I don't even have to get within 5 feet of that ficus to know that. The smell is wrong. Like the kid ate a bowl of stadium nacho cheese, then drank a 2-liter of that cheap store-brand fruit punch. I get to work and have the kid scat scooped, bagged, and disposed of by the time the folk in viewing room 4 have left. I walk the bag out to the bio-waste bin around back and get rid of it, then head to the shed so I can get back to raking leaves. And yes, we rake leaves at the Newman Funeral Home. A leaf blower is loud and smells like exhaust. Is it convenient? You bet your ass. But the Newmans don't want convenient. They want peaceful and pastoral. They also ain't the ones raking the damn leaves that cover the 3 acres the funeral home sits on. And we're talking big oaks, 100-year-old oaks at least. Those sons of bitches shit some leaves like nobody's business. The sun starts to set, earlier now that we're into fall, and I finish up the raking. I rake the leaves into 4 neat, tall piles.
Like melted candy corn,
Mr. Newman says, coming up behind me and giving me a fright. He likes to do that.
I'm sorry,
I say after catching my breath. No apology from Mr. Newman for almost making me stain my jockey shorts. But I'm not expecting one.
The leaves,
he says and points at the 4 piles.
They look like 4 pieces of candy corn pointing up, but they've melted a little because the bottoms of the piles are all soft.
I tilt my head and squint, hoping to share in the imagery. I used to appreciate art when I was back in college, before I had to drop out because the loans just weren't enough.
Because of the colors?
I ask, staring at the orange and yellow and brown piles.
Precisely,
Mr. Newman says and pats me on the shoulder.
Here you go, Isaac. Thank you for the hard work. It is always appreciated.
Mr. Newman holds out an envelope and I take it, fold it, and stuff it in the back pocket of my work jeans.
You never counted. My mother raised me not to make issues with money or other people's business,
I say and smile. I pull out a handkerchief from my other back pocket and mop my brow.
Good advice,
Mr. Newman says and smirks.
Worked up a sweat, I see. It's barely 45 degrees out this evening. Making candy corn is hard work,
I say and smile. He chuckles and nods.
It is,
He says, then looks toward the main building.
My sister told me about the unfortunate incident. I have a different word for it, but incident will do,
I say, and tuck the handkerchief back into my pocket.
Well, I put a little extra in there for you because of that,
Mr. Newman says.
Unacceptable. If I'd caught the little bugger, I'd have taught him a lesson.
We both smile and nod at the lie. Mr. Newman has no bark and definitely has no bite. It's why he's the friendly face and soothing voice of the business. Miss Newman can step up when she needs to, but she doesn't have a way with people like Mr. Newman.
Thank you,
I say.
But you didn't need to do that. Well, I believe I did,
he says and laughs.
I'd hate for a hard worker like you to jump ship because some little turkey left a dookie in the ficus.
This sets me to laughing, which makes Mr. Newman light right up. He's happiest when others are happy. It must be hard for him to work around so much sadness.
And,
he says as my laughter dies down,
the Tomlinsons are expanding, so they have an ad in the paper for more help. I'd definitely rather not lose you to them. An ad in the paper?
He waves a hand at me.
Online. It's listed on all those job websites. Oh, well, you don't have to worry about me, Mr. Newman. I'm happy right here. Good to hear it, Isaac. Thank you. You should call it an evening and go home. Enjoy the lovely night. It's going to be brisk, but clear as glass. Should be some amazing stargazing tonight. I might just do that, Mr. Newman,
I say, and aim my rake at the pile of leaves.
Just after I dispose of this candy corn. Of course, he says and sighs. Well, good night, Isaac. I'll see you tomorrow. Night, Mr. Newman,
I say and watch him walk off, his keys twirling in his hand as he heads to the parking lot. It takes me another hour to clean up the piles of leaves, and by that time the sun has gone down and Miss Newman is walking my way.
Now, Isaac, I know my brother told you to go home and enjoy your evening,
she says as she crosses the already night-damp grass to the large compost bin I built a few years ago for fall leaves and summer grass clippings.
I'm finishing up now, Miss Newman,
I say.
Just need to put my gear up and lock the shed. Then I'm out of here. Well, I'm glad I caught you before you left, because I have something to ask you,
she says and pulls out her phone. She scrolls a little and then asks,
Do you know Rebecca Casey? Rebecca Casey? Can't say that I do. Why? Because, as luck would have it, she somehow heard we needed child supervision for services and emailed me late this afternoon,
Miss Newman says and squints at her phone.
Former teacher, it looks like. She's from 2 counties over, Jefferson. Oh, I see,
I say and nod.
I grew up in Jefferson. That's why you asked. Just thought you may know her. I'll check her references tomorrow.
A sour look crosses her face, and it's easy to see even in the darkness.
Something wrong? 2 of her references are Tomlinsons. One is even Spencer Tomlinson himself. Why apply here then?
I ask and hold up a hand.
No offense. Oh, I know you are Team Newman all the way, Isaac,
she says and laughs. Then the sour look returns.
I suppose they didn't have an opening for her. The Tomlinsons have a fully staffed childcare wing. I've seen the billboards. Haven't we all? Maybe we'll get lucky and this Rebecca Casey is nothing like those Tomlinsons. Takes the right person to work at the Newman Funeral Home. That it does, Isaac.
We stand there for a moment until a crying from off in the pine woods that border the property makes Miss Newman jump.
Just a fox. Want me to walk you to your car? No, I'm good,
she says and gives me a little wave.
I'll see you in the morning. I already did a walkthrough and the building is locked tight. So go home as soon as you put away your equipment. Will do, Miss Newman,
I say and return her little wave.
See you tomorrow. Good night, Isaac.
I watch her until she's in her car and pulling out of the parking lot. Then I clean up my gear and get myself home. When I get home, I strip down, rinse off in the shower, have a little bite to eat, then tuck in and read for a bit until my eyes are tired. I turn out the light well before 11. It's always an early morning working for the Newmans. When I arrive at the funeral home the next morning, an older woman is standing on the front steps.
Can I help you?
I ask as I walk up the steps, my heavy key ring jangling in my hand.
We don't open for another 2 hours, and the Newmans won't be here for another hour at least. Oh, I'm early,
she says and smiles at me. Wearing a simple dress and blouse, the woman looks pleasant, professional but relaxed. It doesn't take me more than a second to figure out who she is.
Rebecca Casey.
She startles a little and narrows her eyes.
Have we met? No. Miss Newman said you asked about whether we needed child supervision,
I say, and ease past her so I can unlock the front door.
I guess you're here for an interview. Yes, and like I said, I'm early. Had to have my cousin drop me off. No car? In the shop, like always. That gonna be a problem?
I ask as I open the door and hurry inside to turn off the alarm. Miss Casey stays out on the front steps.
Come on in,
I say as the keypad beeps and the light turns red, telling me the alarm is off.
I'm gonna get the coffee started. Want a cup? I don't want to be a bother. I'm not going to let you stand out there for an hour,
I say and gesture for her to come in.
I'm Isaac. I handle all the custodial work and maintenance for the Newmans. Do you dig the graves too?
She asks as she takes a step inside.
Nah, Mr. Newman gets day labor for that. I have plenty to do already.
She looks about and I watch her study the place.
The kitchen is back this way,
I say and ease around her so I can shut the front door.
Follow me.
I move off past the viewing rooms to a side hall where the restrooms are. Miss Casey follows close behind, her head swiveling this way and that as she takes in the place. When we reach a door at the end of the hall, I open it, reach in, and flick on the lights, then motion for her to go on in.
This is a lovely space, she says. Not just the kitchen, but the whole home. How long have the Newmans been in business? Oh, the family's been doing this for 4 generations, I believe. Wow, that long? Yep. My granddaddy worked for the family back in the day. Not your daddy? No,
I say, and hope my tone tells her all she needs to know.
Well, sometimes it skips a generation, I guess,
she says and looks around the kitchen.
So how long have you been working for them? A few years,
I say as I start the coffee.
That's a lot of coffee.
I nod at the coffee machine. We use one of those large bun coffee makers with the dual urns.
Gotta keep the beans flowing. We can have a fresh urn out in the reception area all day long. People drink a lot of coffee in funeral homes. Something to do, and also helps keep the frights away, as my mother would say. Keeps the frights away?
She asks, and takes a seat at the small kitchen table.
May I? Of course. I should have offered for you to sit,
I reply, scooping heaps of coffee into the filter basket.
Lost my manners for a moment. No need to apologize. I've disturbed your routine, she says. I'm always early to places. Some folk are punctual. Some are late. Me? Always early. Not a bad trait to have,
I say and pour the water into the maker. Then I start the coffee, turn, and lean against the counter.
So, who are your people? I'm sorry,
she replies, confused and a little wary.
Miss Newman says you're from Jefferson, so I was wondering who your people are. You got a ride from your cousin, but I'll be honest, I ain't heard of the Caseys before. Are you from Jefferson County? I am,
I say and nod. I study her close. No one from Jefferson County says Jefferson County. It's always just Jefferson.
Oh, well, we've only been there a few years, she says quickly. We're not natives. No generations going back. Just some transplants from Ohio. Ohio? That's a ways off. It is.
The smell of coffee permeates the kitchen, and I draw in a deep breath.
Well, while we wait for the drink of the gods, how about I give you a tour? That'd be lovely,
she says and stands up.
But only if it doesn't get in the way of your morning duties. The coffee has started. That's what matters,
I say and laugh.
The rest can wait. Okay, if you say so. I do.
I show her out of the kitchen and give her the full tour. I start with the office area and our supply room just to get the business stuff out of the way. Then I take her through the home, showing her the main reception area, even though we'd had to go through there to get inside. Then I show her the 4 viewing rooms. From there, I take her to the back to show the preparation room followed by the cold storage.
This may be a little too much to see. We can go back.
We're all warm food in the end, Isaac, she says and smiles. I'll be fine.
All right,
I say and shrug and open the door. Oh, you use open trays, she says when we enter the cold storage room.
Yes, ma'am,
I say.
No need for drawers or lockers. This isn't a morgue or medical examiner's office. We just need a place for the bodies to rest before they are prepared for service.
Miss Casey walks around the cold storage, reading each of the tags on the body's toes as well as the labels affixed to each tray.
Gotta make sure the right one is the right one,
I say and smile.
Shall we?
This one has been here a while, she says as she looks down at the face of a much older woman. Any particular reason?
Oh, that's Mrs. Buford,
I say.
Her children are squabbling.
Squabbling?
Fighting, bickering.
I know what squabbling means, she says rather curtly. I hold up my hands in surrender.
My apologies, Miss Casey. Didn't mean any offense.
No, of course you didn't. I'm sorry.
It's early and we haven't had coffee. How about we go fix that and pour ourselves each a cup?
That'd be lovely. We leave the cold storage room, walk through the preparation room and head through the home to the kitchen. The coffee is hot and strong, just the way it should be. And I blow on my mug as Miss Casey sits at the table, her hands wrapped about hers.
So, Mrs. Buford, you said her children are squabbling? What about? She didn't leave a will or any instructions regarding what she wanted after she passed. Oh, that can cause some squabbling,
Miss Casey says and laughs. Then she sips her coffee and smiles.
Delicious. Thank you,
I say and take a seat across from her.
One kid wants her to be buried. The other wants her to be cremated, so her body will be in cold storage until they make up their minds.
That must be awfully inconvenient.
Not really,
I say and shrug.
It's $75 a day to keep her that way, so the Newmans will happily keep her on that tray for as long as needed.
Oh, I see, she says and sips again. This is really good.
Thank you. Hello!
A voice cries from the front door.
There's Miss Newman now,
I say and stand up.
I'll take you to her.
Miss Casey stands with her mug and looks about.
You can hang on to it or set it in the sink there,
I say and nod at the far wall.
Don't feel weird already having coffee. She would offer you some when she comes to get her own cup, so you've just saved her the hassle.
Oh, here you are,
Miss Newman says as she walks into the kitchen. Then she pauses when she sees Miss Casey.
Oh, hello there.
I'm sorry I'm early, Miss Casey says. I take the bus and the schedule is what it is. Which is an interesting thing for her to say. I'm about to ask her about her cousin, but Miss Newman responds first.
Well, I'm glad you aired on early as opposed to late,
Miss Newman says and holds out her hand.
I'm Teresa Newman, and I see you've already met Isaac.
Not by name, Miss Casey says.
You didn't introduce yourself, Isaac?
Miss Newman asks, then waves a hand at me.
Of course not. You had coffee on the mind. Isaac makes the best coffee in the whole Tri-County area. I know, I'm a believer,
Miss Casey says and lifts her mug.
Isaac, can you show her to my office while I pour myself some of this magical elixir?
Of course,
I say.
Then I have to get outside and trim those thujas.
It's just thuja, Isaac. It's plural as is.
Well, however you say it, they are looking ratty,
I say and gesture for Miss Casey to follow me.
See you in a moment, dear,
Miss Newman says as we leave. I take Miss Casey to Miss Newman's office, then head out and get my day started. It's close to an hour before I see Miss Casey walk out the front door. I give her a wave and she waves back, but it's not a very enthusiastic wave. My gut tells me that the interview didn't go well. As Miss Casey heads toward the main road and to the bus stop a block down, I watch her. There's just something about the way she carries herself that has me a little on edge. And the change-up in her story of how she got here this morning doesn't sit right either. I hope Miss Newman checks all her references. You never know what types of people a funeral home can attract. The battery dies on my electric hedge trimmer as I'm halfway done shaping the 5th thuja when Mr. Newman pulls into the parking lot. I lift my hand to wave, but he doesn't even look in my direction as he hurries from his car and into the home. I couldn't see his face, so I don't know if it is a good hurry or a bad hurry. When I return from the shed with a fresh battery, the Newmans are walking my way. Mr. Newman is grinning like the cat who ate 6 canaries. Miss Newman is a little more reserved, but I can tell she's pleased as punch too.
You two look like you won the Powerball. Pretty darn close, Isaac. Pretty darn close.
Mr. Newman says.
The Tomlinsons are closed,
Miss Newman says.
Sudden family emergency according to the notice on their door. We've been getting calls all morning,
Mr. Newman adds.
Folks are even calling my personal cell.
As if on cue, his phone rings and he pulls it out of his pocket.
Be right back,
He says, holding up a finger as he answers.
Terrence Newman, how may I assist you today? I hope they're all right,
I say. Miss Newman asks.
The Tomlinsons,
I reply.
I hope no one is hurt. Well, yes, of course.
Miss Newman says.
But the business will be good to have.
Then she frowns.
You don't seem too excited,
I say.
What's the trouble? I know it'll mean extra work for us all, but we can do it. I don't mind pulling 7 days a week if needed, and I can come in earlier and stay later. No, it's not that,
she says and shrugs.
I mean, yes, it is that. And I appreciate the offer, Isaac, because we will all definitely need to put in the extra hours to keep up. It's just that I was hoping that Casey woman would work out for childcare.
You aren't going to hire her?
I don't think so. Anything specific?
I ask, keeping my own thoughts to myself.
She was nice and all,
Miss Newman says, her eyes narrowed as she thinks.
but there was just something about her.
She shakes her head.
Then when I found her coming out of the preparation room, I just felt a red flag pop up. Preparation room? Why was she in there? We were just about done with the interview when she asked to use the restroom. She said your wonderful coffee was a little stronger than she was used to. I asked her if I needed to show her where they were, and she said she saw them when she got here earlier. But when she took a little too long, I went to look for her and couldn't find her in the restroom. That's when I kept looking and saw her leaving the preparation room. She said she got turned around. And you don't believe her.
She shook her head. I let out a long breath.
Well, good. Because I agree. She was off. I gave her a full tour, you know. She'd already been in the preparation room and cold storage. Plus what? Plus, she lied about how she got here. How so? She told me her cousin dropped her off, and she told you she took the bus. That's strange. Also, I tried calling the Tomlinsons just after Miss Casey left, so I could check her references. And that's when I heard the message that they were indefinitely closed. I had Terrence run by there, and that's when he saw the notice on their front doors. I'm sure we'll find someone. I'm sure we will. Hot damn!
Mr. Newman shouts from half an acre away.
We just got the Resting Meadows account. Seriously?
I shout.
That's great! Oh my,
Miss Newman says.
that is going to be a lot of paperwork to get through to set them up. I better get started.
She hurries off as Mr. Newman crosses through the damp grass to me. I really need to finish the Thujas, but the Newmans are the Newmans.
Half of their residents don't have arrangements already in place,
He says when he reaches me.
I said we'd give them a good deal on bulk services, considering how often their residents pass. They ain't getting any younger.
I say, making sure my voice is light and respectful.
No, Isaac, they sure aren't.
Mr. Newman says and claps his hands together.
What a morning. The Tomlinsons and now this? Gonna be a beautiful day, Isaac. A beautiful day.
He rushes off back to the home, and I get back to the Thujas. After I'm done with the trimming, I get to the weeding. It may be fall, but the dandelions don't care. I'm on my hands and knees, yanking weeds, when Mr. Newman comes out looking worried.
Isaac, have you touched the thermostat in cold storage? No, sir. Why would I?
I reply as I get up and arch my back, stretching those tight muscles that got all bunched up from weeding.
I didn't think you would, but I thought I'd check just in case. Strange. What's the problem? Well, Mrs. Buford's body is 3 degrees warmer than yesterday. 3 degrees? That don't sound right.
3 degrees may not sound like much, but when it comes to bodies, it's a lot. There is no reason for a body in cold storage to change even by 1 degree.
I'll check the condenser and see if it's acting up. Thank you, Isaac. It's appreciated.
He gives me a worried smile and returns to the home. After I finish lunch, I go into cold storage and do my own temperature check. I won't explain how we take the body's temperatures, but let's just say it would be invasive if the people were still alive. Mr. Newman is right. All of the bodies except for Mrs. Buford's are at the same temp as the cold storage room. Hers is 3 degrees warmer. I roll a gurney over to her tray and ease her body onto it, then roll the gurney across the room so I can set her on a different tray. Could be there's a warm spot being created by bad circulation. Except that don't explain why she's the only one getting warmer. The control room is out back, behind the home, so I leave out the side door and head to it. Then I stop. Far off at the edge of the pine woods, I swear I see someone watching the home. I squint against the sun and try to make them out.
Hey there!
I shout and stride across the grass toward the pines.
This is private property!
The person steps back into the shadows and is lost from sight. I pick up the pace, but by the time I reach the woods, there's no one there. I make my way back to the control room and look over all the settings for the cold storage. Everything looks in order. No warning lights flashing or switches in the wrong position.
Not sure what's the matter,
I report to Mr. Newman.
but I'll keep an eye on things. Please do, Isaac,
He says from behind the desk.
Things are about to get real busy around here, so I'll be relying on you more than ever. Of course, Mr. Newman,
I say.
I'm going to go and get rid of the moss on the front rocks. What time is the first service? Not until 1,
He says.
It's a light day today. Probably our last light day for a while.
And he wasn't wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, we have every viewing room booked from dawn until dusk. The Newmans have to hire a couple dozen day laborers and turn them into all-week laborers just to keep up with the burials. As for me, I just don't stop. On top of my normal duties, I'm having to drive a hearse to the cemeteries. I even had to be a greeter twice because of the way the schedules were overlapping for the services. And in all of the hustle and bustle, I forget about Mrs. Buford. It wasn't until this morning, when I went into cold storage and caught a whiff of not quite rot, that I realized I'd slipped on my promise to Mr. Newman to keep an eye on things.
12 degrees warmer?
Mr. Newman asks this evening, when all the services are completed and everyone has left the property.
Isaac, I thought you were going to watch that. I apologize, Mr. Newman. We've just been so busy. I know,
He replies.
but still, Isaac, we can't have the bodies in cold storage warming up. Do I need to call a refrigeration specialist? That's the thing, Mr. Newman. The only body that's getting warmer is Mrs. Buford. That's because she's the only one whose remains have been in there this long. No, sir,
I say and shake my head.
Mr. Williamson and Miss Gomez have been in there for 6 days each. Plenty of time for them to warm up. But they haven't. Only Mrs. Buford. Strange,
Mr. Newman says and rubs his face. The man looks exhausted. Understandable considering how hard he's been working these last 2 weeks. And it doesn't look to be slowing down anytime soon.
I promise I won't let it slip again. I'll stay on top of it. I'm gonna need you, Isaac, because my hands are too full right now to deal with any maintenance issues,
He says and holds up a hand.
Not that I think you're slacking. We're all overwhelmed. I'll put it on my morning checklist and my evening checklist. Again, I'm sorry, Mr. Newman. Water under the bridge, Isaac. Just let me know if anything gets worse. Lord knows we can't afford the time for worse right now. Yes, sir,
I say and leave. It being the evening, I decide to get a jump on my checklist, so I head straight for the cold storage room. I start at one corner and work my way through all of the bodies, taking temperatures and making notes on the clipboards hanging from the trays. Then I get to Mrs. Buford and can't believe my eyes.
Another degree?
I mumble to myself.
How?
I jot down the temperature, sigh, turn out the lights, and go to leave. But I stop, my hand on the light switch. There's a sound coming from the room, a slight sound, like grass rustling against a barn in a strong wind. I flick the lights back on and glance at the corners of the room, thinking maybe there may be a mouse that's gotten in somehow. But I see nothing. And the harder I listen, the more I think it's probably just the wind from outside blowing across the outside vents. I switch the lights off again.
Good night.
I call out as I leave the home, knowing the Newmans will still be working for a good 2 or more hours. They better pace themselves, or they'll burn out. When I pull out of the parking lot, I hit the brakes and stare hard into the wheat field across the street. Someone is standing out there, watching the home. I am sure of it. The time I saw someone by the pines comes to mind, so I throw my truck in park and jump out.
Hey, you!
I shout and run across the street.
Don't you bother running! I see you!
But the person does run, turning and fleeing across the field. The wheat is spring wheat, so it's tall and ready to harvest, which makes it near impossible to run through. How the person is moving so quickly, I don't know. My lungs begin to burn and my sore muscles tire. After a few minutes, I slow, then stop altogether. The person is gone anyway. My truck's headlights only reach so far, and whoever it was has managed to slip into the evening gloom. I stand straight, take in a lungful of air, and walk back toward my truck. Then I stop and glance at a stalk of wheat that's bent and broken. Snagged on it is a piece of material. It's just a small strip, thin and floral, like from the sleeve of a woman's blouse. I look it over, then tuck it into my pocket. When I get back to my truck and hop in, I have made a decision. I need beer. So I turn right instead of left, like I would if I was heading home, and point my truck toward Hal's Market. I'll pass 2 convenience stores, but on my wages, I need the lower prices of Hal's.
Evening,
I say as I enter the store. The bored teenager sitting at the only open checkout line doesn't even look up from his phone. My feet know the way and walk me back to the beer cooler. I select a brand that isn't crap and isn't that bougie craft beer. My tastes won't allow me to get the cheapest, and my wallet won't allow me to get the craft beer. Right down the middle for me. As I walk the 6-pack up to the checkout counter, I snag a bag of sour cream and onion chips on the way, then pause.
Miss Casey?
I ask, seeing a woman standing over by the end of the baking aisle. The woman turns and her eyes go wide. Then she smiles and walks to me.
Isaac, right? That's right.
I go to offer my hand, but one is holding the beer and the other is holding the chips. We laugh at my fumbling.
How's business?
Heavy.
Oh, yes. I would imagine so with the Tomlinsons closed down,
She says.
I am sure you all could use some childcare help now.
Yes, we could.
I say, and my smile falters.
Sorry you didn't get the job. Oh, that's all right,
She says and waves me off.
Don't worry about me. I'm a natural nurturer, so I always have some little ones to watch over.
Okay.
I say, my gut giving me that weird feeling again.
Well, it was nice to see you again. Have a good evening. You too, Isaac,
She says.
and thank you. For what? For showing me around the funeral home that day.
She says.
It was a huge help.
How so?
It just was.
We stand and watch each other for a moment, then I nod and start to walk off. That's when I notice the sleeve of her blouse is sticking out from her coat sleeve, and it's torn. My hand instantly goes to the piece of material in my pocket.
Something wrong? No. No, just tired. Have a good night. You too.
A shiver goes up my spine as I turn my back on her. I have an urge to spin around and make sure she's not following me, or standing behind me with a knife, which is a ridiculous thought, right? Ridiculous.
Can I see some ID?
The teenager asks as he rings up my beer.
Seriously? Kid, I'm probably older than your parents. It's the law, dude.
He says and points to the little sign by the register.
You should be flattered. I'm annoyed.
I say and fish out my ID. He studies it and nods, then rings up my chips.
12:30.
I hand him a 20, and he looks at it like it's made of hair or something. Then he rolls his eyes and opens his cash register so he can get my change.
Can't believe they still make this stuff,
he says as the bills and coins are plopped into my open palm. I don't even bother responding and just grab my beer and chips and head out to my truck. When I hop in, I see Miss Casey talking to the teenager. Then she turns her head and stares right at me. No smile, no nothing. Her face is a blank slate. I start up my truck and pull out of that parking lot as fast as is safely possible. That woman ain't right. The next morning, I feel the beers. Slightly hungover, I arrive at the home and run through my checklist. When I get to cold storage, I am not surprised to find that Mrs. Buford's body is another degree warmer. I am surprised to hear that strange sound again, because there isn't a lick of wind outside. I walk the room from corner to corner and back again, hunting for the noise in the walls, in the vents, in the floor. I even go get my step stool and press my ear against the ceiling, thinking maybe rats or mice are up in the rafters. Nothing in the walls or the vents or the ceiling or the floor. But the sound doesn't go away. I can hear it, plain as day. It's louder than the night before.
What in the hell?
Then my eyes fall on the bodies. I get a little queasy as a thought occurs to me. Could the sound be coming from one of the bodies? Maybe it's gas. Maybe the cold storage isn't cold enough, and one or more of the bodies is decomposing faster than it should. But if that was the case, then I'd smell it. Like I smelled something before.
Crap!
I say, and realize what I have to do. Normally, I'd wait for the Newmans to arrive and tell them what I'm thinking. But I'd promised Mr. Newman I'd take care of it, so I am. I look around the room and sigh. There are a lot of bodies now that we're so busy. This will take all morning and put me behind. But a promise is a promise. With gloves on, I go from body to body, pressing down softly on each corpse's abdomen, checking for any bloating. They are all cold and still. Most have only been in storage for a day or so, and are ready for preparation as soon as Mr. Newman can get to them. He's barely got time for services nowadays. Miss Newman has been handling the greetings and farewells. Like I said, she's not a natural, but she's getting better. I come to the last body.
Hello, Mrs. Buford,
I say, and set my fingertips on her belly. I jerk my hands back. I didn't even press down and I felt something. I felt something move. With my eyes on her belly, I stare in horror as little lines of movement ripple across her skin. How didn't I notice it before? My first thought is to get out of there and call the Newmans, but I don't. This is my job. I made that promise. I place my fingertips on her belly again and keep them there, feeling whatever is inside her squirm around. And that's the word for it. Squirm. Then her skin stretches up against my fingers, and that's that. I yank off those gloves, throw them into the trash by the door, and get the hell out of cold storage.
Mr. Newman?
I say into my phone as soon as the call is picked up.
I think we have a problem.
30 minutes later, Mr. Newman is standing next to me as we look down at Mrs. Buford's body.
You saw something move? Saw it and felt it.
His hands are gloved, and mine are double gloved. He reaches out slowly and places his fingers on Mrs. Buford's abdomen. He waits a second, then shakes his head.
I'm not feeling it,
He says.
You're sure it wasn't gas? Her body is warming up for whatever reason, so it stands to reason she's decomposing inside. That'll produce gas. No offense, Mr. Newman, but I've been doing my job a long while, and I may not have the skills you do, but I know bodies,
I say, shaking my head back and forth so hard I almost make myself dizzy.
That wasn't gas. We should get my sister in here. She pulled up just after me. Can you go get her? Sure,
I say, more than happy to be away from cold storage. I throw away my gloves, then wash my hands in scalding hot water in the sink on the side wall of the preparation room. Once my hands are dry, I walk the home, looking for Miss Newman. I finally find her in viewing room 1, preparing for a service.
It's always sad when it's a child,
she says, glancing at the small coffin on the stand at the front of the room.
Miss Newman, your brother wants you to take a look at something in the cold storage room. Oh, what for?
She asks as she turns a pot of lilies. I explained to her what I experienced.
Are you certain? As certain as I've ever been about anything.
She frowns but doesn't argue, and I walk her back to cold storage. When we open the door, we both stare in horror at what we see.
Terrence,
Miss Newman whispers.
what are,
I choke out.
what am I looking at?
Mrs. Buford's body is torn wide open. From crotch to throat, her skin is shredded like something exploded out of her. And that something is crawling all over Mr. Newman as he lies on the ground, his body coated in what I can only describe as thick, bone-white, gristly-looking worms.
Terrence?
Miss Newman says, this time a little louder.
Terrence!
The last one is a scream, and she rushes to Mr. Newman's body.
No, wait!
I shout, but I'm too slow. Miss Newman is on her knees, slapping the worms off of Mr. Newman. She grabs at them, plucking off handfuls and throwing them across the room.
Terrence, wake up!
I get to her and pull her back, and she slaps at me, her hands full of the worms.
Stop it, Miss Newman, stop!
And a worm flies into my mouth. I scramble back from the Newmans and try to spit the thing out, but it's like it has barbs on it, and the more I try to spit, the farther it crawls through my mouth, then into my throat, then down into my belly. I scream and run from cold storage, headed for the kitchen, hoping I can find something in there that will make me throw up. When I get to the kitchen, I find Miss Casey sitting at the table, sipping coffee from my mug.
I hope you don't mind.
She says as she holds up my mug.
It was in the dish drainer and the first thing I grabbed.
I go to the sink and shove my fingers down my throat.
That won't work,
She says.
I'm sure you felt it. Once my babies go down, they do not come back up. There's only one way to get them out. How?
I gasp as I cough and cough and cough.
First, let's go see the Newmans.
She says and stands up. I stay where I am by the sink.
If you want my help, then you'll come with.
I stagger my way after her as she leaves the kitchen and heads for the cold storage room. The Newmans are covered in the worms. Most of the floor is covered in them as they wriggle and crawl across the cold metal surface.
Aren't they beautiful?
Miss Casey asks.
My babies, my little babies.
She turns and looks at me, her eyes moist with tears.
See, Isaac, your boss should have hired me. I'm excellent with children. Are they dead?
Who?
The Newmans. Of course,
She says and guides me back out of the room, closing the door tight behind her.
but they have a purpose even in death. The larvae need a cold host to grow. Now that they have hatched from that host, they need a fresh one to feed. Growing children need to eat their meat.
She laughs and I gag.
Now, none of that.
She says.
You have work to do. What work?
I ask as my belly cramps suddenly.
First, we'll print out a sign to put on the front door, letting everyone know that Newman Funeral Home is temporarily closed.
Realization hits me, and my eyes go wide.
Yes, just like the Tomlinsons.
She says.
After the note, I'll need you to change the phone message. I can't do it, or someone will recognize my voice later. But you work here, so it's perfectly natural for your voice to be on the message.
I double over as the cramps get worse.
We better hurry.
She says, and helps me shuffle out of the kitchen and into Mr. Newman's office. She types out the message and prints it, then walks me to the front door where she has me go outside and tape it on the front. Then once inside, she locks and bolts the door and takes me to Miss Newman's office, where I pick up her desk phone and change the away message, then set it to active.
Perfect.
Miss Casey says.
This will give my baby some time to develop before anyone comes snooping around. Get this out of me!
I growl at her as my hands clutch my belly.
I can feel it in there! It's trying to find an exit,
She says.
Your body is too warm, the poor thing. Poor thing! Poor thing! Get it out! Gladly,
She says, and I see the knife in her hand that hadn't been there before.
caring for the babies is what I do.
She shoves the blade into my guts and yanks upward.
Now it has an exit.
She says, and gives me a shove. I fall onto my back and the world spins as I quickly bleed out.
Don't go anywhere,
She says.
I'll be right back. Your body is about to be the perfect temperature for the hungry little ones.
She walks away and my vision swims, then darkens. But not before I feel the thing crawl out of my open belly and plop to the floor. I guess Miss Casey was right that first day we met. In the end, we're all worm food. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.